Besides being hot and sunny, Barras was also busy with pedestrians and cars, with neither showing regard for either. The cars were so dented that when they did drive into pedestrians, their crumpled fenders embraced victims rather than splatter them across bodywork. Moreover, the streets were so crowded that driving around a corner took the best part of a week, resulting in cars being abandoned halfway around them, which contributed further to congestion. Its traffic was so dreadful that Barras was often considered to be one enormous intersection. As a consequence, it only had one set of traffic lights. These had been disconnected shortly after installation, however, when the city's congestion meant drivers had little opportunity to pay them attention, evident in the number of cars careering into buildings whenever they changed colour. Although this was unacceptable, it did momentarily relieve congestion. Barras's traffic was an endless cabaret of spectacular proportions, and Oscar found its fervour most agreeable. The city was crowded, hot and furious, the sort of place he could wander with a wanton anonymity in populace, which he did until coming across a cafe he was looking for. The cafe was on a corner, surrounded by abandoned cars, moving ones, and milling pedestrians in an assortment of combinations. There was lots of honking, screeching, and banging, and that was just the pedestrians. Abandoned cars rolled amongst the cafe's tables when hit by those moving, their bonnets flapping until crunching into walls or other cars, after which their broken doors waved like deluded street performers. He scrambled over crumpled bumpers and flattened hubcaps to claim a table that was still upright. He blinked through blazing sun, deciding to order an umbrella before a mug of hot Finn. A waiter arrived holding a pen over a little pad. When he asked what Oscar might like, the umbrella was mentioned. "I'm sorry," said the waiter, with no intention of writing it down on his little pad. "An umbrella, please," said Oscar. The waiter glanced about. "An umbrella, sir?" "That's right, an umbrella for my table." "I don't think that's even possible, sir." "Well, why not?" "Umbrellas can be terribly dangerous. They're illegal here." Oscar stopped blinking at Glare and blinked at him instead. "Illegal? It's against the law to have an umbrella on my table." "Yes, sir. Or on your personage. You certainly can't have one on your table. They're illegal." Are you quite sure?" "Oh, yes, quite sure." His pen at the ready, he waited for something more beverage-orientated. Oscar sighed. He liked Barras, but he also liked umbrellas, and their apparent incongruity tainted his impression of the place even more than its exorbitant traffic fatality statistics, which were so high that new numbers had been invented to assist with their calculation. "You're quite certain there isn't even a small one under the counter inside?" he asked. "Perhaps in lost property, left by a customer?" "No, sir. Barras doesn't have any umbrellas whatsoever. They're illegal." "Illegal, yes. Look, I must admit to struggling with the notion." "It's a legal term, sir." "I'm sorry?" "It's a legal term. It means they're not allowed." I know that, but why?" "Presumably so members of the legal fraternity can communicate with each other." No, look, I mean, why are umbrellas illegal here?" The waiter glanced up at a sky so cloudless that their absence was probably for legal reasons also. "Well, it doesn't rain here very often for a start," he said, "so we just don't need them. But more importantly, they can be extremely dangerous." "Umbrellas? Well, don't be ridiculous." "With respect, sir, I'm not the one asking for an umbrella on my table." He pointed at a poster in the cafe's window. It read, "Remember, umbrellas can be deadly." Oscar began a series of scoffs that became staunched when a car slammed into the curb and bounced through occupied tables. It gathered patrons in its fenders, ploughed through things that shouldn't be anywhere near, and slammed into another car that had done something similar earlier. The murmur of dissent arising from those extricating themselves from its bodywork was such that Oscar wondered whether they wanted umbrellas also. After they'd helped the driver open a crumpled door, there was an argument about who should pay for the spilt hot Finns. The driver was adamant it shouldn't be him, considering their foolishness in sitting at tables on the pavement. If anything, he said, they should pay him. The argument escalated until another car ploughed into his. Since this one was driverless and gathered them communally, they eventually agreed to disagree. Oscar watched them prise off crumpled fender a second time and stumble back to tables that hadn't been shattered. He turned back to the poster. It had a picture of some car-smashed tables where umbrellas had impaled patrons who'd been sitting at them. The point was indisputable. "Is rush hour always like this?" Oscar asked the waiter, before cringing when a screech of tyre was followed by shattering car. "What do you mean hour?" After Oscar finished staring at him, he asked for a hot fin. "Though I can wait," he said, "as it might be prudent to get theirs first." He pointed at the disgruntled patrons who, having returned their overturned chairs, realised they'd be better used to prop up the splintered tables rather than their bottoms, unless they found something they could improvise as table legs. It was a pity they didn't have any umbrellas. "I must say I find your city terribly exciting," Oscar said, contributing to the small round of applause offered in the wake of their recovery. "But wouldn't some sort of fence be wise?" There was another bang, which had Oscar and the waiter cringe again. "Where would we put a fence?" the waiter asked as a car seat sailed overhead. Oscar looked around, realising the pavement had barely enough room for splintered tables and smashed cars. "The abandoned cars are as good as anything else when it comes to protecting us," the waiter said. "Although it's true that working here is rather like playing an incessant game of pinball. If things get really bad, we go inside. The walls generally stop anything really dangerous." "Generally?" By way of illustration, a car slid, screeched and slammed into an array of abandoned ones. It somersaulted across them, showering patrons in a rain of shattered bodywork until becoming lodged in an upper-storey window where it teetered in quiet smoulder. Oscar turned back to the waiter. "Perhaps make that 2 hot fins," he said, "and forget about the umbrella." The waiter nodded, before hurrying to those trying to re-establish their bottoms on what remained of their chairs. At a table nearby, a dog peered at him from behind a newspaper. When Oscar smiled, the animal lowered the paper and rolled it up. He stood, tucked it under his paw and approached. The dog asked, "Would you like an umbrella?" "I would like one for my table, yes," said Oscar. "Why?" "Because it would be perfect." "Perfect for what?" "A cliched postcard that I could then send home." "Where is home exactly?" "Well, the same place as yours, I believe." To this, the dog nodded, sat down at Oscar's table and held out a paw. "Binklemitre," he said. "VP of A." Oscar took his paw before returning it, as was the custom. "Oscar Teabag Duvin, VP of A also. I believe I made the mistake of assuming the waiter was you." "I get that a lot," the dog said. "It must be the hat." Oscar blinked at him. "But the waiter isn't wearing a hat." "Which makes it all the more bizarre, don't you think?" Before Oscar could reply, they were distracted by some burgeoning street-related cabaret comprising blaring horns and yelling pedestrians. "Have you been here long?" Oscar asked, turning back to him. Binklemitre shrugged. "About half an hour." "No, I meant here in Barras, watching this peculiar creature named the Arthur." Another shrug. Quite a bit longer then, yes. Definitely before last Thursday. I remember that because I had to return a library book." The cabaret was in full swing and involved a veritable swathe of traffic arguing with a small army of pedestrians. "It must be an extraordinary place to live," Oscar said, watching again. "Very exciting, I should imagine." "Well, if one likes this sort of thing," said Binklemitre. "But I much prefer Asquith. There's less sun for a start and umbrellas are legal." The veritable swathe coalesced into a sort of badly choreographed musical with a libretto composed entirely of profanity. "Tell me what you know of this Arthur creature," Oscar said. More shrugs from the dog. "Well, that's the problem, not a lot. Or more specifically, nothing at all. He has a routine that involves going out for a stroll in the evening and then going back home again." He stopped when their hot fins arrived. "And that's it?" Oscar asked, sipping his and retching. "There's nothing more you know of him?" Binklemitre frowned in thought. "Well, he breathes air, at least I presume he does. In fact, anything else I can offer is also presumption." "Well, like what exactly?" "He eats food, he has carpet." "But he eats carpet?" "No, he has carpet in his house, presumably." After some more blinks, Oscar said, "Well, anything else?" "What, presumption-wise?" "Well, ideally not." Another frown. "Well, he has at least one lavatory." The frown deepened. unless that's why he goes out for a stroll. Binklemitre, even I could have come up with those things. Yes, agreed Binklemitre. That's the marvellous thing about presumptions. They're so presumptuous. Mind you, when the catacombs advised that another Velvet Paw was coming to Barras, I was worried about having nothing more to offer, which is where the presumptions came in. Presumptions are really great when you think about it, because not only are they limited by imagination, but justified by it as well. Anyway, I put together a small dossier stating pretty much what I've just mentioned, minus the presumptions. What, minus them? Yeah, I was planning on using them in a sequel. A sequel? It wasn't asked as a question. Yes, you know, if the dossier did particularly well. Right, look, Binklemitre, do you have it here? Well, no, it's really more of a draft at the moment. But you just said you'd already put it together. A frown. What, a sequel? No, the dossier. Oh, yeah, sorry, I was being presumptuous. May I see it? A small piece of crumpled paper was retrieved that had the same sentence scrawled in pencil upon it. That's it, Oscar said. This is all you've come up with since being instructed to watch this creature, going outside for a stroll for a bit, and then going back home again? Well, it's succinct and to the point. Oscar sighed. Where does he live? Why, in his villa. No, I mean specifically. Where does he live specifically? Where does he go specifically, and for how long? What, specifically? Yes. Frowning, Binklemitre counted the answers off on his paws. His villa, a stroll, and for a bit. Oscar stared, stunned to meet a Velvet Paw more useless than he. Honestly, Binklemitre said, there's nothing more I can offer. The animal is a veritable recluse. He comes out in the evening, goes for a bit of a stroll and goes home again. I suspect the highlight of his day is using a door. There's really nothing more that can be added. Frankly, that dossier is brimming with detail. It's short, admittedly, which is why I made the full stop at the end of it so large. Oscar read the sentence again, in case he'd missed something. A second one, for example. When it was clear he hadn't, he asked, "Have you been inside his villa?" A shake of head. I was only ordered to observe him. When that dossier was all I could come up with, I presume the catacombs decided they need something more. Well, can you take me there at least? He nodded. That much I can manage, certainly. I've rented a little place not far from his. It's in a rather splendid part of town down by the docks. I wouldn't mind living there myself long term, but I don't know if I could live without umbrellas. He leant forward. Did you know that they're illegal here? Oscar nodded. Umbrellas? Illegal, if you please. It's absurd. A waiter carrying a tray of hot fins was startled by a flying hubcap. He stumbled sideways, spilling its contents on Oscar. Well, my word, Binklemitre said. What a perfect advertisement for their necessity, Duvin. You should do that more often. Later that afternoon, the two Velvet Paws waited by the window in Binklemitre's apartment. It overlooked a beautiful collection of villas cascading down toward the sea. The sun was already low, and its reddening light bathed the city's terracotta in more of the same. Tiled roofs lined streets, their rusting brown framing reds of masonry beneath. Mops of palm trees stood tall beneath dispersing heat of day, their groves leading down to a dark purple sea. Were it not for abandoned cars littering the street below, Oscar would consider the place more beautiful than Rouen. But because they were all over the place, with some of them upside down, he did not. Abandoned cars were unbefitting to a scene so lovely, and he tried pretending they were parked that way intentionally, except for those lodged in windows, which he pretended were curtains. They sipped hot fin and waited. The Artifer won't leave until dusk, Binklemitre said. It's always dusk and dark, like his clothing. I get the distinct impression that rather no one saw him at all. They waited. Well, perhaps I should have put that in my report, Binklemitre said. I wouldn't worry. The catacombs have a lot of photos regarding such detail. Why is there so much fuss over him anyway? He's a recluse who goes out for a stroll. Why are the catacombs so interested? Well, apart from anything else, his apparent introversion is the opposite of what he's renowned for. Moreover, the catacombs have evidence suggesting he does rather more than simply wander around docks at dusk. It appears that he's far more active than your meticulously detailed dossier suggests. This was met with sips and blinks. Apparently, Oscar continued, he has a tendency to travel across the world in a manner most peculiar. Well, in what way peculiar? Instantaneously. What do you mean by that? That, Binklemitre, is what we're going to find out.